My name is Marcus Orelowitz. I live in Johannesburg, but I grew up in the country. I grew up in Standerton, and when I saw what was going to happen in Israel in 1967, I had just come out of the army. I'd spent a year in the army gymnasium and 2 stints on the Botswana border. And then when this whole situation arose in Israel, where Egypt had sent out the United Nations troops, that was the buffer zone between Israel and Egypt, I realized that things were getting pretty hot up there. And then also what happened with the South African Federation, they already started asking for volunteers to come to Israel. I went to Joburg, to the Zionist Federation, and we had to fill in the forms and go for medical tests, etc. Once we passed that, then we were told to be on standby, and they told us when we were going to fly out from South Africa. All the flights were paid by the Zionist Federation, and we had to sign a contract for 6 months to stay in Israel. We were on standby, and then when we couldn't fly because of the war starting on the 5th of June. So when they called us to go to the airport, we flew out from Joburg. We flew around the Bulge with SAA. We landed in Greece, and then El Al fetched us and brought us to Israel. When we got to Israel, when we landed, there was a plane from South America and one from France. And these were all volunteers, and they all come for the same situation in Israel. They all came to help. We were then taken to a moshav, and our passports were handed in, and they gave us a mitnadev card, an ID card, which we had to use the whole time. And then we were allocated to kibbutzim, where they needed us during the situation where they needed us most, because most of the people in the country were in the army and on the border, and they needed help on the kibbutzim and even in town. I was sent to kibbutz Shamir, which is on the Golan Heights. And when I got there, they asked for tractor drivers. And luckily, because I grew up in a farming area in Standerton, I knew how to drive a tractor. So I was put onto a tractor, and I worked there with a machine behind me, which cut and baled it into squares for the animal fodder. I worked there it was about 2 months. And then one day when I got to the tractor driver was back from the Suez Canal, and I lost my job. So I went to work at the bee factory, and I learned all about honey and bees and how the product is made and bottled. And that went on for about another 2-3 weeks. While I was on Kibbutz Shamir, the army fetched us and took us on a tour up to the north. We went past Kunetra, and we went to a little town called Khushnia. That is exactly where the army had stopped. From Khushnia, you could see Damascus at night with the binoculars. We were 40 kilometers plus minus from Damascus. 2 days after I got to the kibbutz, Shamir, I was determined to get to the wall. This was just a few days after the wall was taken. So what happened was we got a lift with the army jeep to Jerusalem. We walked through the dung gate, and there we found the bulldozers had just finished bulldozing all the houses that were built right up to the wall. And as you see today, the open square, that was full of rubble and dust, and everything else was there. So behind us, there was a big tree, which we climbed into. This was my cousin and myself, and we could see the whole wall, but we weren't allowed to go there yet because the army was busy cleaning and checking that there was nothing that could hurt any of the people there. At about 12 o'clock, they allowed us to open, and they opened up the gates, and we were allowed to go right up to the wall and touch the wall. And then the people started pouring in, religious, non-religious. They started davening and dancing, and there was no mechitza, so everybody was mixed, and it just went on till it got dark. Then they lit torches, and they were dancing with the torches, and I think we left there, must have been about 12 o'clock that night. It was unbelievable, the euphoria and the dancing that was going on there, and the davening at the wall. So we got a lift to Tel Aviv, and on the beach, we sat on the beach and watched the sun come up. It was an unbelievable day because we were able to get to the wall where so many people over thousands of years have been wanting to get to the wall, and there it was, we got there. And it's a day that I'll never forget in my mind. My first impression of Israel when I arrived, it was that there was a lot of tension, but the tension had gone past because the war had finished. And all that they wanted was help from us because there were things in town like the hospitals, the schools and so on. They needed the girls to go and work there. They needed the guys to go and help where they could with delivering certain goods in the towns. And most of all, they wanted us to go to the kibbutzim and help with bringing in the produce or whatever was happening. There weren't too many of us that went to Kibbutz Shamir. When we got there, it was a Romanian kibbutz. The culture between the South Africans and them, there was a big difference. And that is why later I moved to Kibbutz Tzorah, which is between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, because that is a complete South African kibbutz, and I fitted in better there. But that was later while I was there. After 50 years, contact with all the volunteers, some of them, I saw them. When we did our talk at Sydenham Islands North Shul, we were 4 of us. But for the rest, I haven't kept contact with them. My experience in Israel changed me for the better because I could see that Israel was fighting for its life. It had to succeed. And it had to succeed for a reason. It had to succeed so that people, Jewish people in the rest of the world, where there's problems, are able to get to Israel. And I remember one day with my son, who lives in Renana at the moment, he's married and living there 12 years already, he's got his family there. He said to me, "Dad, why did you go to Israel in 1967? And I said, first of all, I'd done my army training, so if I was needed, fine. If not, I would do what they wanted me to do. But the whole point is that if there's a problem around the world, and as you can see what's happening now, it's getting worse, there must be a country to be able to go to for the Jews where they won't be persecuted in this country. That's their own country. They can live there and they can get away from the persecutions. If Israel was around in the 1930s and 40s, imagine how many Jews would have been saved because they would have been able to go there. I did come from a Zionist background. Unfortunately, my parents died when I was 8, but my brothers who looked after me after that were all pro-Israel. They were always pro-Israel, and they wanted to support financially or however they could. But what turned a thing in my life especially is that I had 2 aunts who survived Auschwitz. They were actually liberated from Auschwitz and taken to Russia, because Russia liberated Auschwitz where the Americans liberated Bergen-Belsen. We lost contact with them from 1938, and then one day in Standerton we got a letter from Russia which said, "Dear Joseph," which was my father's name, and it was all blanked out by the Russian censors, and at the bottom it had Fanya and Dina, and then we knew they were alive. It was 1955, and he died in 1954. So with the Jewish, I don't know, I was young, I was about 9, so I don't know who they arranged it with, but with I don't know if it was the Zionist Federation or whatever, and also with Israel, they managed to get them out of Russia to Turkey, from Turkey to Italy, from Italy to Israel, and then my one aunt came to live with us here in South Africa. What motivated me to join up was, you grew up in a country town. I went to an Afrikaans school for 7 years, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism also in these country schools, believe it or not, especially, never mind being Rooinek, which is the English part of it, you were a Jood. And there wasn't such a pull towards South Africa as a pull towards Israel, because Israel felt like it could protect you or help you, whichever way it is. So now when the problem came there, I thought I could help them. Oh, I think Israel's great. I go to Israel every year, go to visit my family there. And if my 2 married daughters here would move there, I would move there tomorrow. But we've toured the whole of Israel. We see Israel once a year. We take the kids there. We love to swim at Herzliya Patuach Beach. And it's an amazing country. Every time I go there, I see how it's grown and how it's become. In Tel Aviv itself, those skyscrapers and everything else. I remember when we were there in the beginning, it was Lod Airport, never mind Ben Gurion, and it was so tiny, and everything has now grown amazingly in Israel. And it's a strong power today, and that is amazing for me, that it's become such a great country. My emotions were that I'd like to have gone back to Israel. But then what happened in 1968, I got married. And then you have kids, and then you move from the country, you move to Johannesburg, and you get involved. And before you turn around, the kids are at school, and then it's a bit late, and also you need financially to be able to do it. And that is why I didn't go. But I think I inspired my son, and that is why when he finished his accountancy here, and he went to Israel, and he's very happy there. And he loves it there, and that's all we do. We go to visit. Looking back at the experience, I would have done it again. I would have gone to Israel to help Israel, because Israel has to be there. There's no discussion about that. And I just felt by going there, whatever little bit I could help with or do there, or work on either of the kibbutzim that I was at, and to see the place and to see the territories. I did a lot of touring while I was there, and I met a lot of different people, and it was the biggest experience was that I was lucky to get to Jerusalem, to get to the wall, and to be there at the time. It was a fantastic time, and that is one thing that will always remain in my mind. I feel proud that I was able to do it, and that other people from all around the world who came. There were so many different countries, and so many, even from Australia and New Zealand, although they had to stay for a year, their contract was, because the flight was more expensive, so they made them stay for an extra time. But I met so many different people from around the world, which was amazing. It really was that they had also had the same feelings to come there. Although the cultures were completely different, but their feeling was they had to help Israel as much as they could. Do I feel like a part of history? Well, that part of history, yes, I do feel that I was part of history. And if the situation would have arisen again, if it arises again, if I was younger, I would definitely have gone, because of the young people that I met there, as I said before, from all over, and the Israelis. And I want to tell you that the Israelis, when you had your card and had Mitnadav on it, and when they spoke to you in Hebrew, then you couldn't understand them, and you said, Ani Mitnadav, Midrom Africa, the expression on their faces that they knew that you had come to help whatever way you could. This is what was very nice to see, and they appreciated it those days as well, because there were half the amount of people that there are there now, the population, and they were absolutely dumbfounded that the other Jews from the diaspora had come to help.